So, hello, fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 6455463728. And when will the US become a third world country? Some of you might be surprised that somebody might even think that that is a possibility. But I think that it's an inevitability. Anytime you have a place, I think, in my opinion, and maybe I'm really off base, but it's my belief that people act like electrons. If there's a voltage difference between one place and another, you're going to have a lot of electrons, i.e. people, trying to come across from the low voltage to the high voltage place, or is it the opposite? Until there's an equilibrium, until both places are the same. Of course, you can use energy in the case of, I don't want to go too far down that analogy, but the point is that in many instances you just have to look at older civilizations like Rome to see what happens. If you have that shining thing on a hill, people are going to come and see it. Rome was a place that was pushing against the barbarians, and it attacked them in order to have the Roman Empire. And eventually there was an not even equal, there was a overwhelmingly opposite force that came and sacked Rome. And I think every civilization has within it the seeds of its own destruction. It takes a certain amount of energy to keep order, to fight against entropy. But unfortunately, that is always a losing battle. So eventually, entropy wins, disorder, chaos, it wins. That's why the universe is going to suffer a heat death, because entropy wins. At the end of the day, everything evens out. At the moment, and for the longest while, the US has been something of a cross between a developed and a developing country, in terms of the US has the highest, the third highest population in the world for a country. There's China, I think there's India, and there used to be either Indonesia and the US. But I think the last thing that I saw is that with about 350 million people, the US has about, is number 3. Now, that is an amazing source of power to have that many people in your country. And at the same time, it's an indicator, when you're already a very powerful country, of a potential problem. And that problem is that, hey, a lot of people are probably coming into this country to make it powerful. There's a brain drain for many countries in the world. And that's what fuels the growth of the country. The growing population fuels the growth of the country. Because you need to keep building more houses to house these people. You need food and all of these different things to keep these people, this population, growing. Unfortunately, as with any other developed nation, you want to keep that high potential. You want to keep things selective. Unfortunately, you're battling the very thing that makes you powerful and successful. People are coming in, it makes the country great. After a while, you're like, too many people are coming in. Maybe since the beginning, too many people are coming in. Well, when you stop those people coming in, that's going to stop your growth. Now, if you look at other developed countries in the world, what's happening with them is that their growth has been stalling. And I would have mentioned this already in terms of another piece I mentioned about how Trump has been stopping immigration. So I guess I won't go too much into it, but I would imagine that the path to the U.S. becoming a developing country is probably going to follow along the lines of what happened in South Africa, what happened in some of these Caribbean countries, and what happened in, well, to a very minor degree, I suppose, Hong Kong and some other places, and other places maybe in Africa and wherever else. And the idea is that people, as the population shrinks, the white population shrinks, what is going to happen is they may feel more comfortable leaving to go to a country that they figure has more people like themselves because it's safer. That doesn't mean that a significant amount of their resources and power and ownership, just like in South Africa, a lot of white people left South Africa, but the ones that are there are still very wealthy, and even some of the ones that have left would have, ownership in companies and whatever else that they draw on from there. And I think that as the immigrant population, which has a temporarily higher birth rate than the native or white people in America, as that population increases and white people become a minority, they may decide that they prefer to live in Europe. And as that population shrinks, at some point, I think, you might reach a point where, just like in South Africa, maybe there are minority, or what are currently minority leadership in Congress, in Supreme Court, in the presidency. You just have too many minority presidents. Okay, you have Barack Obama. We don't expect to see another even partially minority president for a really long time. But when, maybe a Hispanic or white person or a Hispanic non-white person might become president, and then you might have 1, 2, 3, a sequence of non-white presidents, and a growing number of minorities in the Supreme Court, in Congress, representing minority interests. And as that begins to grow, and the white people that are in the U.S. feel less comfortable, they might want to have a separate country. I don't know how that is going to go, because that usually doesn't go very well. But aside from that, they might decide that the UK is looking a lot nicer. And like in South Africa, they would still retain interests and ownership and whatever else. But if you do a Google search for whether or not South Africa is considered developed, you might see that a lot of people are arguing about that. And of course, it's really because the leadership in South Africa is black. If it had remained white, it would, even though most of the people would be living in poverty, 90% of the people under apartheid were living in poverty, it might have still been considered a developed country. Even though their lives are better now, many people consider South Africa to be a developing country, and they have the belief that no matter what happens, how good things get there, it'll never be developed. So I think that they suggest that by 2050, white people in the US might become a minority. I think beyond that, 2080 or something like that, people are saying that 80% of the births in the US might be from minorities. So we are thinking, or I'm thinking, it's possible that by the middle of the next century, the U.S., with a majority of disparate ethnic groups and a large minority of white people in the U.S., it might be considered to be a developing country. Of course, I'm trying to make a comparison in my head to what happened with Rome. Instead of the barbarians sacking the place, they just would have come in and taken over. So, but of course, Trump has changed that path slightly. We'll see if Joe Biden, if he is elected, if he reverses anything, or but either way, if he reverses the immigration, then white people in America will become a minority. If he doesn't reverse the immigration, then the U.S. economy is going to falter, just like other developed countries in Europe and in Japan, etc. So either way, it's not really. It reminds me of a black hole. Once you pass the event horizon, your future is in the black hole. All directions lead to the black hole. And it's not that the U.S. becoming a minority, current minority, what we define as minority-run nation, is a black hole, is this horrible thing. But many people, I'm sure, would see it as a horrible thing. But I think that major changes all across the world in the next century are inevitable. Anyway, guys, you can wish me Lucks, LUCSS. You can like, comment, subscribe, comment, subscribe, and or share. And of course, I don't prefer it, but you can always do nothing. Peace.